and welcome once again to COVID Conversations with me, Carvin Goldstone, where we discuss all things pandemic. Very important this week. As you know, the President, Cyril Ramaphosa, he addressed us on Tuesday, yesterday. And it was quite interesting because he spoke about COVID relief money. And all of us heard 500 billion rand. And the question was, where did we get 500 billion rand from? But what we took away from this was how South Africans really need some maths lessons, because one of the most common threads on Facebook was, if we've got 500 billion rand, can't the president just take out 59 million and then give each of us 1 million each, and then the problem's solved? And the answers to that, you would be surprised, were, oh, that would mess up inflation, because if everyone has a million rand, that means that a million rand won't be worth what a million rand is worth when we don't have it. But what no one was considering is that if you have 59 and a million, that's only 59 people with a million. But anyway, on to more important issues. A lot of us are considering our way forward in the pandemic. Anxiety has become a part of our lives. For many of us, we're concerned what we're going to eat, how we're going to pay our rent or our bonds, how we're going to pay for our cars. And it's a concern that we might have for a few months going forward. What the president showed us in his COVID-19 relief plan was that the plan is planned to carry out over a few months, which means that for the next few months at least, we might be in this situation. And if you are feeling any anxiety, you're not alone. And in the show today, we are going to talk to some professionals about what people are facing on the ground and what we can do in the situation to make it a little bit easier for all of us. So to kick us off, here's a skit by me from Chandre's mother.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Hey, my nerves are finished, I'm telling you. The way I'm worried, I won't lie, eh? No, I'm very worried now. Hey, the president spoke last night. He's talking about giving grants. Did you hear how much? I don't know where is that gonna go. Hey, no, I'm not worried about me. I'm working. It's all these people living around me, you know? They're all already by my door. Full by the door. My mother sent me to ask if I can get some tomatoes. I mean, I can't be serving the whole community now. Hey, this lockdown needs to end. I'm telling, and as for Chandra, the way I'm so mad at her, I just went now and took her phone away from her. Yeah, I got the phone, I just took it away from her now. No, I'm walking past the room, and then I'm listening. I can hear she's talking on the phone because the head's forever glued to the phone. And I'm listening, and then I can hear her saying, she won't let me out on the road. I'm listening. I said, excuse me, let me listen. I listened again. She won't let me out on the road. I walked in the room. I grabbed the phone out of her hand. I said to the person on the phone, listen here, this is Chandra's mother. I don't know who you are, and I don't care. Chandra is not coming out on the road. And listen to me, you and Chandra, who is she? The cat's mother? I told them straight. These children, man, how? Can you believe them? She won't let me out on the road. I walked away. As I'm walking with the phone, Chandra says to me, Ma, you can't take my phone. I said, what? She says, you can't take my phone. I said, why? She says, because Dad bought it. I said, excuse me. Your father might have bought this phone for you for some Christmas present from a long time ago, but I'm telling you now, all the power that's in this phone was charged from my electricity. I am taking it away because the whole day they sit here with the phones charging. Plus, Eskom is raising the tariffs. I'm so mad, man. I'm really now I don't know what to do. I'm really, I'm at my wit's end now with all the situation. I just can't. And plus the small ones, they're always getting hurt now. That's the thing I don't like about having the children in the house the whole day. They're crying because the one pushed the other one and the other one got a big knob on his head because he fell. Why is it with the children at home, they always get hurt? And plus they fight. I just gave them all. I said to them, I don't listen to any stories. If you're fighting here, everyone's going to catch it one time. Yeah, I gave them. They're all sitting there, the hiding of their life. I'm telling you, yeah, they're sitting there now. All quiet. But Chandra, I can't believe this child, man. At a time like this, I really need her to step up and to be the bigger sister. But the way she's carrying on, she wants to play with her friends on the road. Anyway, yeah, So I'm just gonna see what's gonna happen now because I'm worried now, Even my head, the way it's spinning, I'm thinking, trying to calculate where is this gonna come from for that. Hey, but we'll see, we just trust in God, we'll get through it. Hey, because I'm really now, I don't know what to do now. I'm at my end. Yeah, I don't want to lose my mind over this thing. That's what I'm worried about, Yeah. Anyway, my friend, you take care now, right? Okay, bye.
So many of you might be feeling like Chandre's mother, wondering where is the next meal going to come from, not necessarily for yourself, but from the community around you, because it's really the community around us and the one that you live in that might pose the most problems. So if you can feed your family the way we grew up, we always made sure that our neighbors had. And that creates stress on one family who has more to give. Now, to discuss a little bit more about what the pandemic does for us and how it affects our mental health, I have with me Dr. Alicia Porter, who's a psychiatrist. Good evening, Dr. Alicia.
Hi, good evening, Carvin.
Good evening. So tell me, maybe we can start at this point. What do you feel is one of the issues or some of the issues that we are facing as far as mental illness and mental health goes in a pandemic?
So, Carvin, if I can just start out by saying, during pandemics, they come with three major areas of concern, that being medical, economic, and psychological. Now, usually the first two are usually the first that are taken care of, and the focus is on them. But the psychological aspect of pandemics is often there are consequences, number one, and also the consequences are long lasting. So long after the pandemic has finished
Awesome.
or it has completed, the psychological consequences are felt. And like we've heard most people say, we're living in unprecedented times. So we've actually never been this way before. I think the last time there was a pandemic was 100 years ago. So most of us were not even, I don't know if anybody was alive at that time. So there's no blueprint. We're basically making it up as we go along. So it's actually an abnormal time and it's unfamiliar. And so, we talk now about new normals and new routines. Like people might be working from home, but you're not working from home really. You're working from home during a crisis. You're not homeschooling your children. You're homeschooling your children during a crisis. And so the virus is going to be with us for a long time to come. And there's definitely an impact on our psychological well-being. And I'm not just talking about people who historically or who have mental health problems. What they're finding, or an organization called SADC, which is the South African Depression and Anxiety Group, they did an online survey recently. And what they're finding is that even people who don't have mental health issues are struggling at this time. They stress. And I think their study showed that like 65% of people reported that they are stressed at this time.
What's the challenges that, like, feeling stressed is one thing, but a lot of us don't understand what that does to you. If you can maybe elaborate, when you've stressed yourself out and you're anxious, what does it do to your mental health?
So, when you are stressed and anxious, you definitely get more irritable, for example. So you have increase in your irritability. You may have some changes in your mood. You also even may have changes in your sleeping patterns, where previously you would be able to sleep. Now suddenly you're having a fitful night's sleep. You may have changes in your appetite. Even your ability, to concentrate may be impacted, because with stress, your body starts really, stress is not a passive process. You don't sort of, the thoughts in your head, they may go round and round, but they actually lead to physical manifestations. Like, for example, you may start feeling like your heart is beating faster. You may get a bit short of breath. So, because you have an increase in your stress hormone, so your body actually mounts a response to stress. So it's not just you sitting in your corner and not, your body's actually changing as a result of stress.
Okay, so in case let's say, for example, I'm feeling this extreme stress, what can I do to not beat myself up? Because I think in this moment, a lot of people end up like blaming themselves for the situation they're in, and yet it's not your fault. We are in a pandemic; it's unprecedented. The whole world at the same time is going through the same thing. What's some of the practical little tips that people can do just to ease their anxiety in this time?
So I think, before we start in terms of how we're going to manage, maybe we should understand why. Why are we stressed? Because again, it's not just about the person who has mental health challenges, it's about everybody stressed. The world is closed. I'm stressed. You stressed. It's not just one of us, it's pretty much all of us who are stressed. And so, the virus itself contributes to that stress. It causes the stress. And maybe, for some of us, it's the fear of the virus, for example, where you worry whether you're going to get infected or not. You worry what's going to happen to you if you get infected with the virus. I mean, for example, even just now, a normal shopping trip or a trip to the shops now becomes a
Yeah.
completely different ball game. I mean, I was talking to somebody today who said, they struggle when they have to go shopping because of the whole the process that has to be followed. So, there's the virus and those fears that come with the virus, but also, there's multiple insecurities that arise because of the virus. For example, employment. Am I going to have a job after this? What's my job security? What are my finances going to be like? But also for some, it's even just basic things like food and where my next meal is going to come from. And those people with chronic illnesses, if I get sick, what
Mm.
is going to happen to me now? I mean, I just think about at home now. I've got a very active 5-year-old, and he jumps around all day, whereas it was okay before. But now it's like, what happens if he breaks something? And a
Mm.
trip to the hospital, what is that going to mean now during this time? Is he going to get adequate care? So that's just compounds all of that. And sometimes it's not necessarily that you're verbalizing it, but just your own internal world just going round and round. And then there's the whole issue of information overload. you
Yeah.
know I mean, social media and the news. I mean, the news channels are playing 24/7. We're getting updates. We are basically inundated, and we're basically marinating in social media. And then there's the very important issue that you touched on last week with regards to fake news. Actually,
Mm.
fake news increases our fear, it increases our anxiety. I mean, I think about the multiple WhatsApp groups that we're now involved in. I mean, I
Yeah.
think about, I woke up one morning to the fake news that Idris Elba had passed on because of coronavirus. And
Yeah.
in those 5 minutes, trying to surf to see whether this is actually correct or not, there's increased levels of anxiety. You think, what, Black James Bond, our hopes are gone now, and all of those kind of things. So even fake news has a impact on our mental health, and it's so important that we verify these news sources. And then we also have to be adapting to a new way of being. This
Mm.
1.5 meters away, physical distancing. If you, like me, who comes from a family of huggers, it's tough,
Mm.
because you've got a
Absolutely.
physical distance. And so the truth is that nobody is unaffected by this virus in whichever way or form.
Mm. Okay, just maybe I'll pick up on what you're saying there about the news cycle. So we all find ourselves absorbing so much information. I find myself sometimes just in a rabbit hole, video after video. Is this potentially bad? Should we not be consuming as much as we are, or should we kind of measure how much we consume a day in terms of news related to the pandemic?
Definitely, it's definitely about balance, and it is about measuring, because it definitely impacts. I mean, they've actually, even before the pandemic, they had done studies that showed that actually fake news definitely negatively impacts your mental health. So we should
Mm.
be measuring it. Like, For example, you know, you should maybe decide how many times a day you're going to go and check stats, that it shouldn't
Mm.
be every day. I mean, I can remember at the beginning of the pandemic, the TV was always on in the background with one of the news stations, and you're constantly updating how many today, how many today, how many today. You know, so
Yeah,
just sort of deciding that I will, you know, you need to limit the amount of time that you spend, and you also need to filter your information. So it's not about then just taking it all in and going with every story and being, I mean, even if you have to mute sometimes the WhatsApp groups that are going. So it really is about metering and not marinating in this buffet
yeah.
of
Mhm.
information. Yeah,
Okay,
because you
cool.
definitely
We're
would
gonna
go.
continue this. Yeah.
I said no, because thereafter you definitely go to bed after having read some story, definitely heavier than had you not
Mm,
maybe. Um,
absolutely. Yeah, we're gonna continue this conversation, and Cassandra's gonna join us, and Sylvia. Cassandra is psychologist, and Sylvia community activist, and look at what's really happening on the ground in many communities. And before we get into that, I want you to watch this clip. It's from Bishop Lavis in Cape Town.
Okay.
So what we've just seen from that clip is the desperation a lot of South Africans are feeling, just to take the conversation forward, where the very basic needs that people have are not being met because many are not working. And so yeah, we can see people now resorting to looting. And it's interesting because this truck that was delivering food to the people, and yet still they intercepted it. Sylvia, I just wanted to bring you in there. Sylvia Danster, who is a community activist and works with communities on the ground. What is the feeling on the ground, and what are the challenges people are bringing to yourself, people like yourself?
Thank you, Carvin, and good evening to the viewers. So the little clip that we just saw, it speaks two things to me. And we got to be careful about this because the current situation, yes, I understand, is causing, there's a lot of people amongst others who are very desperate in desperate times now and are looking for measures, to bring back food supplies, to their families, because a lot of us have lost jobs in the interim. And looking prior to even the COVID situation, we've had a lot of unemployment, within the country. But we also have to be careful, Carvin, of the crime, reality of crime. And I'm concerned about the crime networks or the crime synergies that people use even before the COVID-19. There's a lot of syndicates that people have in order to, do their crime, and these are the network syndicates. So what happens is they're going to use the vulnerable um, people like you and I who are on the ground to loot these stores. Or the truck that, for instance, that we've just seen in Cape Town that was looted. So they actually have these syndicates where they're looting the stores, they're breaking into the stores, and they are actually taking the bulk of it. Half of those are people who are homeless people, who are, the drug addicts, and then they're taking it back to these people who are the criminals, per se. And they are taking this opportunity to make extra money. You must know, because of COVID, everybody's on lockdown. So their syndicates or their networks have closed. So this is also a criminal
There's a criminal element to it, yeah.
criminal activity. We've got to be careful, absolutely. And they're using the vulnerable people on the ground. So yes, we are in desperate times now, and people who are walking by will obviously, run by and grab a packet or two of whatever it is. But majority of that, we've got to be careful also about the criminal activities.
Cassandra, I can just bring you to that point as someone who's working on the ground in shelters as a psychologist. as Sylvia is pointing out, people who are already vulnerable also now find themselves in a situation where they're not only homeless, but they also might be looking for food, and then that anxiety can cause other mental illnesses. This is an area you're working in. What have you found working in the shelters in Pretoria?
Sure. So thanks for having me on, Carvin, and hi to the rest of the guests. I think it's important to think about two things here, and Sylvia made a great point. I think the first thing is that this environment at the moment, times at the moment feel quite unsafe for everyone, and how we express this feeling unsafe is going to be different based on people's different experiences. So I think that one way people will do that is to try and stockpile, and that's the people that go and panic buy. But here as well, we have people who are going to get what they can when they can, and that's why I think you're seeing a lot of people rushing to go and get that. But I think Sylvia is also correct in that it's a prime opportunity for exploitation to happen. So lots of vulnerable people now are at risk to be exploited, and there's not really much that can be done based on that, given the way circumstances are running. So I think one of the main challenges on the shelters, or for people in their homes even, or people who are vulnerable at this time, it's not just people on shelters, is that they might face certain levels of exploitation in terms of accessing food or even accessing care. And those are big concerns. But I also think that we have a population who's used to feeling anxious, worrying about food, worrying about where they're going to get things, and now they're being trapped in one place in order to try and survive, and that can also be very challenging.
Just to pick up, Cassandra, one of the unfortunate things about what took place, for example, in Cape Town, is that when a truck that is looted for whatever reason, the people that it was intended for never gets to. So those people who are now expecting they had this lifeline, even that's taken away, and that could further increase the anxiety when they feel as if even the little bit that they were supposed to get was taken away from them.
Yeah, I think it speaks to the bigger issue around stockpiling in this country, which is that the more we try to hold on and take things, whether it's us stockpiling at Checkers or people looting trucks, it creates a disbalance, if that is the correct English, an imbalance in how we are able to distribute things like food. So it is a major problem, but it's coming from feeling unsafe. I feel unsafe, and I do not know how I'm going to cope with this feeling of not feeling safe, and therefore I'm going to try and get what I need to do to protect myself.
Sylvia, what do you think are some of the practical ways we can assist people on the ground, and especially yourself, where you based, people, community workers like yourself, where they live? What's some of the things that you are doing and the things that you'd encourage other people in your position to do?
Okay, so firstly, I just want to make a point, Carvin. I think what happened here was, when we have these type of disasters, obviously there's a panel who will sit, even at parliament level and discuss, okay, we have a disaster, we're going to, just lock down or shut down the country. But I'm concerned whether we're pulling in all the avenues or all the stakeholders so that we deal with each, like for instance, the desperation. I'm worried about whether, when they set, did they worry about how people will feel exactly? Because the stockpiling, I don't know where it started, but I mean, even just toilet paper, what makes you think that toilet paper then is such a huge necessity? So I think we should have rather been not workshop, but at least given some information first around, using the social media platforms, because this is where the scares are coming from. I log onto social media, I find, oh my goodness, is somebody going to stockpile? Next minute, before we're locked down, then I'm asking for leave. And what I'm going to do, I'm also trying to dash to the stores to stockpile myself, because I'm starting to feel, it's going to be out. Then we were told later, after they noticed that there was the stockpiling from different cities. Then we were told, the distribution or mass distribution has already been prioritized prior to this. So stores will be open. We'll be able to move around, get our essentials, but the aim of being locked down is so that the virus doesn't spread. So I feel like they already, as a country, we made a little bit of a mistake by not, giving out the information correctly to others. As far as being on the ground is concerned, Carvin, I find, I work in informal settlements. I work in rural areas. I don't only work in the urban where Newlands is where I live. And I find people have the problem of not having to be able to get information. And how is that? Lately, we all digitalized. We're using smartphones. We've got social apps. We've got social media, television, and sometimes, I mean, most of the information is being shared on like 404, the news channels 404. And in some homes, we still don't have satellite television. We only have the basic SABC 1, 2, and 3. So I think that's where also, people are panicking. So what I see my neighbor doing, I try and, also do. And then when I'm unable to, and I realize the reality is, I'm still lower than she is, or, it's more average. And then I start to look at other means. So I think communication, information is really scarce when it comes to those places like informal sectors.
Can I
Dr.
just,
Alicia, just
can I
want
make
to mention, when we see people being sort of self-preservation, resorting to self-preservation and stockpiling, does that speak to some sort of like little mental cue that I need to look after myself?
Yeah, so I was actually going to say that, like I said in the beginning, when there's a response to the pandemic, we start with the medical and the economic response, right? And
Yeah.
so the psychological response is then left, or it comes much later. But all of that, the stockpiling, the looting, that is actually a manifestation of an anxiety.
Yeah.
People are worried, they're scared, there's fear, there's increased stress. So if we can understand that, and obviously that wouldn't have been a priority initially, because the priority is that we need to sort out the medical, the medical, we need to sort out the economics. We're not thinking about how are people feeling, when actually we should be. And that's why we need to sort of begin to understand even our own mental health, or our own psychological, our own psychology at this time. But all of that are manifestation, because people react differently. So maybe in the more affluent suburbs, it was stockpiling toilet paper, and in the more, the lower income communities, it was looting and that manifestation. But we are all anxious.
Okay.
We are all stressed, but we just manifest it differently. So it's quite okay for us to sit sort of in our pedestal and say, I can't believe, people are doing that, but actually, I can't believe you stockpiled toilet paper.
Yeah.
It's sort of the same.
The wealthy looting, stockpiling. Okay.
But the underlying sort of thing that's driving it is this anxiety, stress.
Sure. Cassandra, for people who are watching, and for someone who's working quite closely with the most vulnerable South Africans, what would you say is the way to kind of ease your anxiety? Are there little tips, or is it a process? Is there anything that you can offer for people who are watching, who might be watching this and feeling like the world is crashing in on them?
Well, I'm glad you asked this question. I think it's a really important one. So I want to start by saying that even if we do acknowledge that, we shouldn't stockpile and that people shouldn't be afraid, I actually think that's the wrong approach, because fear is a natural response to the fact that we feel unsafe. So even if we do give this information and it was given, people are still going to stockpile because people are still afraid. We haven't been able to take the fear away. So I think there's a balance that we need to strike here between what is information we can receive, and then what do we do with that information. And that comes to your question about coping skills. Now, I think one of the most important things is to be conscious about what we're feeling, to be conscious about the idea that we are living in a new normal and that it is scary. But I want to add new words to this as well, because we're using the word stressed a lot, but people are feeling helpless, angry. There are other feelings to this, and it's important that we take the time to start differentiating how we feel, and that we acknowledge it. So that would be step one, because if we don't know what we feel, we can't do anything about it. But most of all, we are feeling these ways, whatever the feeling may be, and it's important to have room for these different feelings. We're feeling it because we're feeling out of control. We're feeling like we've lost our sense of certainty. So your next step is to then understand, what is it I cannot control at this time because there's a pandemic, and what I can control. And what we then need to focus on is the sphere we can control rather than the sphere we can't. So I can't control that that I can go for a run, for example. I can't control when lockdown is going to end. What I can control is how I observe the protocols of lockdown, for example. So a really important skill, I think, is to try and differentiate between those two, and kind of understand what we cannot control right now. And as tough and frustrating as that might be, focus on what we can. And I think what's really difficult around the different lines is what some of us can and can't control right now differs. So for some people, where I'm going to get my next meal may not be something they cannot control, whereas some people can control that. So I think there's lots of different layers to this, and it's a complex situation. But that would be sort of the initial things that I would say.
Just we're about to exit the show, but just before we go, maybe Cassandra, you can help us. If people feel anxious and want to call someone or want to speak to someone, who would you suggest at a national level or even a provincial level that they get hold of?
Well, I think my first suggestion would be the South African Depression and Anxiety Group. They are a long-standing helpline that have been servicing our anxiety and our needs, and they're a big resource. So I would suggest that we give them a call, and you can call them on 0800 567 567, and they'd be able to help you. But another resource that I wanted to give you, which I think can be very helpful at this time, is a specific line that Gift of the Givers started to help people specifically with COVID-19 stress. And their number is 0800 786 786. So I would say those two numbers would be your main helplines. I know that they're quite big helplines, but I think that they've tried to upskill and resource and make themselves available for people's calls during this time. So those would be the two I recommend.
Cool. Sylvia, for someone at community level, what would you suggest people do? Because there's an interesting project that's going where they help, each one helps one in a community. So an entire road, they look at which families need, and they all put a tin of beans or a loaf of bread or salt. What's some of the more on the ground methods of helping people that you would suggest?
Well, Carvin, we ourselves are practicing each one, preach one. But as the organization, Durban East Society Club, we are an NPO, and we've also been offering our services. Myself as the founder, as well as our members. But in my home, we just started first from our home, and we just go on a Thursday and on a Friday, and we will distribute food. And obviously, I attend to WhatsApp calls, and my line is open for people to communicate with me. For the more professional stuff, I always relay the messages to the other organizations like SEDEC, etc. But there are a lot of organizations within the community. We work closely with the counselors. I work closely also with the neighborhood watch groups, other NPOs as well, who offer support for mental instability, etc. So we also offer support for gender-based violence, as you're aware that I'm a gender-based violence activist as well. So, and we've seen an increase in that in the current situation. So if you would like, I can just share my number. It's 062 272 5941. If there are any supports that we cannot offer, we relay you to the necessary or the relevant departments or stakeholders.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Dr. Alicia, just as we exit, some final thoughts from yourself. If people are at home and they're not sure if their behavior might be their mental health slipping, what are some of the things that you can practically look out for yourself on your own at home, just to say, okay, I need to maybe take stock, or I need to call someone?
So I think when you start to feel persistence, so the key word would be if there's a persistence of this anxiety or the stress, or you're starting to feel lower than normal. And also if your sleeping patterns become more disturbed, your eating patterns, your energy levels, and you can't shake it. even though you try to maintain a routine and you try to do activities and you just can't. I would say that would be when you would need to reach out for help. And there are the resources that have been mentioned would possibly be a first port of call, or if you know a mental health professional or even your general practitioner, to reach out and say, I need help. I think that there's nothing wrong with asking for help, and I think maybe sometimes that's our biggest problem, is that we struggle to ask for help. But I think in unprecedented times we need to take unprecedented measures, and asking for help might be one of them.
Thank you so much to all our guests. Thank you, Sylvia, Cassandra, and Dr. Alicia, for your time this evening. Well, that's the show, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you watching at home, if you've enjoyed listening to it, please share it with a friend of yours who might benefit from this information. A special thank you to those who are putting it together, Skyroom Live. And I'll see you on Saturday with our next show. Thank you.